All right. Hope you're all having a fine day, despite weather. Andrew, where are you again?
I am in St. Louis Park.
And what's it like in St. Louis Park compared to Duluth?
It is, well, let's see. I don't know what it's like in Duluth right now. Occasional flurries, not detrimentally cold, but it's, cold-ish. That's what I would say.
Chelsea, where are you at?
Minneapolis.
Oh, can't hear you.
I'm in Minneapolis.
Okay. Brandon? Oh, you're muted.
Minneapolis.
Okay, great. And Emily's in Two Harbors, and Laura, you are in
St. Cloud.
St. Cloud. Lisa's in Duluth, and Judy
Baudette.
Baudette. I knew it was a B. Okay. So let's get started. You've been hopefully looking at all of the resources, the readings, the videos, and the documents related to PBL. So I'll just let anybody pipe in. Tell me a little bit, what have you learned so far from the course information? Maybe something new, or maybe a misconception you may have had about PBL that has changed?
I will start with something simple, which is that PBL can't be, it's not like something, it's not, one project at the end of the unit that now you have time for. So we're going to do a student-led project at the end. And I didn't have strong thoughts that that's what it was, but I did kind of have the idea that, well, I guess we could try parts of it and see how student-led stuff goes sometimes. But it sounds like it's really a methodology that should be adhered to, and that's the way students learn the content from the get-go.
Yep.
I guess I learned that the thing that I like about it the best is that it's a lot less of the teacher doing things and the teacher talk, because I'm very guilty of talking too much in class. So it's kind of a reminder for me to let my kids take the reins and to trust them.
One thing that I found while I was planning was that I can tend to overthink things, so I can let it get too big. And I really had to, as I was filling out the project planner, I even found myself deleting things because I was adding too much information. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing. And so I felt like that maybe we can overthink things a little bit, that we can simplify without it becoming a negative thing.
I'm going to jump into, I kind of have the same feelings as you. Going into the project, I kept thinking it had to be this huge, big, elaborate thing. And then looking at some of the examples, it's, oh, okay, I can tone it down. And these smaller aspects can still be PBL as long as you give them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go turn off my dryer so I can hear you better.
I liked how the PBL resources really emphasize some of the other things that we've been studying in this course, and how collaboration is really significant in the process or in the methods, and how it promotes critical thinking too.
Well, Chelsea, that leads me to my next question, which how does the whole PBL concept, how does it relate to the first 4 lessons and the different strategies and methodologies we were looking at in those first 4 lessons? Can you remember what we learned about?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how does PBL relate to the topics we were studying in those first 4 lessons? Constructive controversy, academic conversation, critical thinking.
I think that they're all things that would be evident if project-based learning is being facilitated in the way that research has proven that it's effective. I think that project-based learning, or even problem-based learning, and all the different types of based learning are done at schools right now. Just probably about every school uses some form of blank-based learning, but they're not teaching it to fidelity, and therefore they're not seeing the constructive controversy, they're not seeing the critical thinking actually being implemented, and a lot of those other things that we did learn about in the first couple of weeks.
Good.
I would say it's very much related to academic conversations, and that's probably where you get a lot of your questioning from. Because I know in PBL, a lot of the things that you're trying to do are answering big questions that are produced by the students. So having them engaged in conversations and thinking about how others are thinking and asking questions is kind of like the start of that.
I think critical thinking too, it sounds like there is, there's no memorization of fact and regurgitation to answer a question on a test in this style, as much as there is really trying to figure out how to use material to solve a problem. And that's much heavier use of critical thinking than a low-level test question would require.
I think relevancy is also really significant in all of the lessons, the first 4 lessons that we did in this unit, and what ties into project-based learning. You don't have academic conversations or constructive controversy. I mean, there's really no point if it's not relevant to the students or to the real world. And I think PBL does a nice job of focusing the methods and lessons and things like that around real world issues.
Let's talk about where you're at with your planning process. Anybody want to go first? Let us know how it's going, if what your topic is, what you need help with.
Mine is about energy conservation. I saw a lot of really good examples when I was looking for things on the internet that were like 5th grade level. And we get Excel energy kits every year that come, so each student gets a kit that has like a bunch of different stuff in it to conserve energy in their house. So we're going to do kind of like a learn away type of project where part of it actually takes place at home, and they come back and they make graphs and they discuss how their new light bulb saved energy, or how their new thing that they get to attach to their faucet in the kitchen did stuff. So I'm excited because the kids are excited about it.
That's good. What's your leading question?
Oops, sorry. So the main question around all of it is, what can we do to save energy in school and at home? And then we're going to look at the differences between what you can do at school and what you can do in the house.
I guess I can go next. Mine, I'm not very far in it. I'm still kind of thinking, but I'm thinking, I have 4th graders and I'm thinking about doing like a geometry unit on area and perimeter. And my question is going to be something about one of the 3rd grade classrooms. Mrs. Boltz is not very happy about her layout of the classroom, and the kids need to redesign her classroom to make easily acceptable like spaces for group work and just a better layout for her. So.
I'm using my teacher wait time.
I have 7th grade English classes, and I wanted to do something around bias and persuasion in advertisements. So I've got a few standards picked out, and the driving question, I have a couple ideas right now. How does the media impact how we view ourselves and others around us? And how can you effectively use biases and persuasion to sell a product to a target audience? So my idea will have students learning about different types of persuasion and biases that are in media, and then utilizing those to create like a flipped script advertisement to target an audience that is atypical for a particular product.
Mine is very simplistic, probably because I have kindergarten, but ours is focused around classroom jobs. And the driving question is kind of how can we keep our centers organized and our classroom running smoothly? Just the only problem we could really come up with as a class was our overflowing garbage cans during the day, the items not being put away right after center time, just different classroom responsibilities that the kids had that weren't getting taken care of. So we're going to do a classroom job one.
Mine is also pretty simple. I'm not teaching currently, but the last grade I taught was second grade. So I noticed one of the social studies standards was drawing a map of a destination from a book. So I wanted to take a look at the Magic Tree House books and have the kids work in pairs to draw a map, but also integrate that tech piece. And what are different ways that they can draw a map? They could do it by hand or they could use a computer. And then maybe talk about how do you get from here to there, and talk about different ways that you could reach that destination. It's a very simplistic explanation.
You have a driving question yet?
Yes, but I've been toying with it. So first of all, I just wrote down how do we get from here to there. But then I think in the end I had how do we use a map to get to a destination. It needs some tweaking.
So I guess I'll go next. I teach 4th and 5th graders, and they come to Starbase, our program, for a week at a time. So so for the longest time we've taught, and the 4th grade program is rocketry and aerodynamics, and the students kind of figure out exactly what their basic needs would be that they would need to bring to Mars to have a Mars colony succeed. But we don't really have a whole lot of curriculum written for kind of like the next step when humans actually do get to Mars and we do start, having a permanent base on Mars. Like, what are some of the problems that those astronauts?
That sounds like fun. Andrew, let's hear about music.
I'll tell you about music. So I am lucky in the sense that some people say that concerts are projects, and each of our grades has 2 concerts. And in the arts standards, there are 4 overarching categories, and they are to connect, perform, respond, and create. And so we create and perform always when we're doing that, but we often don't do the connect piece that well. And one thing I think I really want to do is make it focused on connecting with an audience. So this sounds like a simple idea, and if there's a better lens to look through, I'd be grateful for your thoughts. But we have a 919 seat auditorium, and it's usually halfway full or so. And I would kind of like to angle the whole project around how can we do a concert that performs to a sold out or full auditorium. What goes into that? Why do people go to concerts? Do they know that the performance is going to be of a high quality? Are they interested in the kind of music that's being performed? And let the students research, do themed concerts, bring more people in? If that's so, what kind of music do we need to select? How do we make sure we sound good? Do we advertise it? And that kind of thing. So it does take the focus a little bit off of just learning music. But ultimately, it's to put on a good performance.
Have we heard from everybody now? I think. So is there anything that you're struggling with or questions that you have?
About how many standards should we be? I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but I had 17 standards that can be taught during this lesson. And so I know I emailed them to Andrew, and then afterwards I went through and I deleted 9 of them. I think I have 8 now. So do you just want to pick several, or?
I mean, it's going to depend a lot on what you're doing and the grade and such, but if you have too many standards, then you're responsible for assessing all of those.
Well, that's where when I started narrowing them down.
So a lot of standards might be present in the project, but you want to say, which are the ones I'm focusing on assessing?
Okay, so we had done a project at school a couple years ago when we had to write units for social studies, and our administrator wanted us to write down every standard that was addressed during the unit. And I think that's where I got confused.
Well,
so we only want to address standards.
Or you could list them separately in your plan and say standards, you know, that are present in this and standards being assessed, and just differentiate them.
Okay, okay, all right, that sounds good.
I'm wondering about individual versus partner or collaborative assessments. If like the summative assessment should be in collaboration, so in students in pairs or in small groups. And formatives along the way should be individually assessed, or what your thoughts are about that.
It would depend on what the formative is. There might be some little quizzes or activities that they do one-on-one, but the majority of the project is collaborative. So for sure that final project will be graded that way. But that's why it's so important that you build in the structure so that everybody's contributing to the project and there isn't just one person or two people taking the lead. And that's the hardest thing about PBL is making sure everybody's contributing.
That's kind of one of the questions I had too. I think that last source that you shared with us that was titled like the 3 common problems of PBL or something had something about making sure to grade individuals' work on their final project, but I was kind of confused by that as well.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to pull out the separate elements. Another big important piece is that they're doing self-evaluation and reflection. And that's one way for them to show you if they have mastered or are exhibiting the qualities that you're looking for in the project.
Regarding the assessment piece, I saw there's a slot for rubrics or rating criteria or whatever. And I guess I'm wondering I guess there could be a self-reflective evaluation, but based on the thing I'm thinking about doing, would it be more appropriate for students to administer like a short exit survey to all the audience members? Because if if everybody showed up because they went home and said, Mom, Dad, you got to bring 5 people because that's what we're doing, that doesn't really solve or reach what we were trying to teach. So would that be a way for students to measure how well they met the goal, or is there a better way to do that?
Doing a reflection piece is what you're saying.
Right, because I don't know if a rubric per se would allow students to see that, or if so, then I have to develop one because there isn't one.
I think the reflection piece will be a big part of it, depending on the questions that you ask.
Right, right.
So there should be 2 pieces. They need to self-evaluate the project as far as how well did our project meet its criteria, but then also self-reflect on their participation.
I see, their personal contribution. Yeah.
You can create checklists along the way for the formatives where you can individually make observations as they're working in groups, who's cooperating, who's getting their work done, who's contributing ideas. Checklists can be a very easy way to assess.
Okay.
Have you all had a chance to look at some of the samples that are in the course resources folder, or that I also put some in the discussion forum?
I've looked at them and actually I found 2 that were the same as mine. So can we take ideas from those?
Absolutely. I don't want you to take the whole plan and just put your
Right.
name on it, but you can certainly take pieces as long as you reference them, give them their citation like you would in a paper.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because I had kind of decided mine before I started looking, and then I thought, okay, that just.
And there's so much good stuff out there. It just makes sense that we, can borrow and share what's out there, but you need to modify it to fit your own classroom, your own students, your time frame. The last group on Thursday night had quite a few math teachers in the group, and they were really struggling with how do you do PBL and math? It just seems more challenging. Science, social studies, literature, it's kind of it seems almost a natural. Math just seems so much more isolated and, just the way you build skills in math doesn't quite lend itself, it seems. And yet I was able to go out and find some good examples that I posted for them. I don't think we have any math people in the group today, do we? Math particular. Okay. Yeah, if you're only teaching high school math. What's that?
Oh, I was doing my lesson on the geometry.
Okay, so you're doing a math PBL. And how are you feeling about that? Is that coming together for you? Do you feel like it's difficult?
I think it is.
Are you including standards from other disciplines?
Yes, I will be. Yeah. But my main focus will be like perimeter and area.
And geometry is I think the math area that lends itself best, I think, to most people naturally.
Yeah.
Are each of you incorporating standards for more than one area in the curriculum?
Mine are all English language arts. I went through all of my standards this morning and double checked, and there's just nothing else that really, unless as the project is developing, I might find some and I can add them in later, I suppose.
I'm thinking social studies because they're talking about taking care of your classroom and jobs.
And that's what I thought, but there's no Minnesota social studies standard that addresses that, oddly enough. Citizenship, maybe that might.
Right.
Okay, I guess I could look at that one a little more intently.
Mine are all just from ELA standards. Is that okay, just to be from one content?
It is, but I think you can often find that there are other standards that you are addressing and might not even realize it. Can you tell us again what you're working on? Was that the persuasive, the one on?
Yeah, so persuasive writing, analyzing bias, and maybe perspective too. I'm not really comfortable assessing other content standards, and so even if other content areas might fit, I don't plan to assess those, so I probably wouldn't include them.
Okay. How about technology standards?
Yes, but those are ELA standards, so they come from they come from the category like media literacy, but those are under ELA.
Okay. Some states separate them out as specific technology standards.
Yeah, ours are incorporated in ELA.
Because mine is science, it's definitely going to have some math standards in there too, with data analysis and graphs and things like that, because they go together very well.
Yep. Have any of you found some good websites or resources outside of what I provided within the course, but that you've discovered yourself that you found very helpful?
They are specifically for ensemble music, and they're actually more at the high school level. And I closed the window now, but there are several videos that somebody put out of, they call them student-led ensemble evaluations or whatever, but they are project-based learning in either the instrumental or the vocal ensemble environment, and they're on a page. I can't remember the website name. I just closed it, and it's in my history. But they had video footage of students leading one another through the rehearsal process and then offering critique to one another to improve their performance product.
Andrew, would you post any links that you found helpful in that forum, even if there's no other music instructors in this session? Next semester, I may have somebody who can
I'm
use
glad
those.
to. Yeah, I will do that. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, I just keep printing stuff off, and then I can't remember if I found it myself or if you posted it. But I did find the website isn't on this, but it's a project-based learning rubric. Did you post that?
I posted one, but there's probably many out there. So
yeah, and it's Performing in Education is the name of the company.
Okay,
and
it's familiar. So yeah, find that link.
Yeah. So at the bottom it just says Performing in Education, but it has it's just a basic project-based learning rubric, and so I printed that out, and it kind of made things a little bit clearer as to what I should be focusing on.
Yeah, please share that then in the forum.
I will.
I hope you've taken some time with that PBL Works website, because that really has a lot of helpful information, and they'll have examples of the project overviews as well as full project plans. And I have put some in our folder in the course resources, but not all. I mean, there's many more out there. But the more, I think, plans that you look at, the better feel you'll get for how to do this for yourself. And you'll see that they can be somewhat different. There's no perfect way, but there are essential elements that you want to include. And I'm fairly certain I posted for you the gold standard PBL essential project design elements. I know I put it in several places, but here's my printout of it. But it also, actually, I'm gonna try sharing my screen, because there's also the checklist that you're going to be using with your peer is based on these essential. So let me try share, see if I can get to the right place. I've got lots of stuff open, so it's taking a minute to find which one. Can you see my screen right now? Do you see at the PDF?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the checklist you'll be using with your peer, and it just has, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down question. But I hope that you would also add some comments that would help your peer. But this is something you can also use to self-evaluate as you go and before turning in the final piece, is to ask yourself questions like, is this focused on key knowledge, understanding? What are the success skills? Does it have a challenging problem? You know, all of those things. And projects that are completely different in what they turn out will still have all of these elements. The one at the end, public product, I know some people are a little concerned about, do we have to go out to the public and present? It's like, no, the public could be the class next door, or invite the principal and the vice principal and somebody else to come in, just so there's somebody that they're reporting to besides themselves. Was there any questions if you've had a chance to look at these criteria? Did it make sense? Everything from student choice, you want to make sure you're building in some choice and not making the criteria for the PBL so prescribed that they're just following steps. You actually want to give them time to critically think and make some decisions, and of course go back and critique and revise, just like you're going to be doing with your plan for your PBL. This project for you is really like a PBL for you. Do you know what I mean? Your PBL is to design a PBL, and you need to go through all this same process. That you're collaborating, that I'm giving you some choice. I don't want to make it too prescriptive, like fill in this exact form. There's several different layouts out there for project planners and unit planners, that you find one that works for you. On Thursday night, some of them were felt constrained by the two project planners that I put in the course resources. One was called the overview and one was called a pre-project planner, but they were, you know, tables, and, you know, it had this interesting kind of structure that was hard for them to type in the boxes, or it overflowed onto the next page. I said, don't worry about that structure, that physical structure. If you just need to write it out with headings and paragraphs and bulleted, that's fine, as long as all the elements are there. It doesn't have to be in a fancy, you know, graphic organizer necessarily. When
we talk about giving students choice, do we like, so if we isolate a portion of the project that they're going to, you know, need to learn something about a skill before they can apply it to the rest of the project, do we say using this website, or this video, you know, come up with a paragraph summary about how this kind of thing works? Or do we say simply, what examples can you find out there on the internet or elsewhere of other schools doing what we've already done? I mean, is it that vague, or do we want to provide them some?
Well, again, it's going to depend on your group. So I would start out with the less prescriptive and see how it goes. And then you might have to, like, push them along a little bit.
Okay, you could use this. Okay.
Sometimes they'll surprise us where we think, oh, they're not going to have a clue. And then they do the most amazing things, right?
Okay. Right.
Any other thoughts on that? Did you see in my announcement I posted, I think on Friday after Thursday night's meeting, extending it to the 15th if you need to with your peer? Take a little bit of pressure off.
Didn't see that. Yeah.
So does that include the post in the discussion
Yes.
board as well? Okay.
Have you all connected with a peer? All right. Is there anything else that you specifically hoped we could talk about in this session?
I did look up that website on my phone quick, and it is just performingineducation.com.
All right, and I did not provide that one, so I appreciate you finding it and posting it for others.
And so there's there's lesson plans and resources, and there's a blog.
Awesome. It's amazing how much is out there once you start looking.
Mm-hmm.
And one link leads to another link, and then after a while you forget where you started.
Mm-hmm. Or where it came from.
Add to favorites, I can remember to do that. Draw a map. So to go back to the first 4 weeks of this course, I want you to go back in there and look at what we were learning about and make sure you're pulling some of those pieces in, that you're bringing in an academic conversation or even a constructive controversy or the types of critical thinking that we've been learning about. So you might have to go back and review a little bit those books and websites.
Do we allow, obviously we have certain dates where something has to happen. And in my case, we have concert that's going to happen, and that's going to drive a lot of when we have to have things done by. But do we allow for students to find out information at different paces for much of the unit? That's the philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until such a date, and then we say, on this day we need to apply criteria to formatting the way we invite people to the concert or whatever that is. But is it that part of it is totally free form that way, and then we arrive at a date and then we need to guide it a little?
Yeah, I think you need some kind of big benchmarks along the way, but provide some, flexibility in there, because
and then within that there's freedom.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Because to expect each group to be at the exact same place in the process, then you're controlling it again, right?
Right, and then it's not what this is. Yeah.
Was there any specific video or resource that you found the most helpful or enlightening? If you could recall. I know you've seen a lot.
I liked the first video. I think it was for this class. If it wasn't for this class, I'm sorry. The first video of the school in Maine.
Yes.
Just showing the way that the whole thing worked so well, and the student motivation, and that it was just, a regular middle school, and they just were able to get this incredible ownership that students had over this energy process. I thought that was very cool to see the whole thing work.
It was amazing, but it can also be overwhelming because you think, I can't do that.
Oh, that's right.
We don't expect this PBL to be quite that level yet. We're just getting started, right? But it is neat to see that it can be done.
Yeah, it's a good point of reference. Yeah.
I think just seeing some of the lesson plans and seeing just a lot of the other questions out there helped me decide, like, okay, like it really can be anything. You just have to.
I think what some people struggle with is they feel like, well, how am I going to fit this in? I have all this curriculum I'm responsible for, and now I have to add on this one thing. And the whole idea is that it's not an add-on. If you're incorporating the standards, then it's part of you delivering the curriculum, not in addition to, because that can make you feel overwhelmed. And I think it's difficult in some schools where they are kind of prescribed on how to be teaching the curriculum, and they aren't provided a lot of autonomy. And I know that makes it a little more difficult. Or any of you in a position where you feel like, oh, this is me going off, task, and someone's going to catch me. That's good. Because our schools, I guess that the teachers feel like that. I have to be doing this and this and this at this time.
I have felt like that in school at various points, but it usually by the time that I'm done doing something different, or I have something that I can show my administration, they're usually asking for us to share that with each other. So even though it feels like you're not doing what you should, I think that it's more impressive to your higher ups than you might think it is.
It's the only way they're going to be convinced is to actually see it happen and say, oh, the children can still master the standards and probably better.
Yeah, and they're always telling us, do what your kids need, do what you need to do for them, and if this is something that benefits them, then they're gonna stick by you.
Be the role model. I had another question in my head I wanted to ask. I'll think of it if somebody wants to chat.
I'll share something quick. It's not a PBL resource that I found, but I think I'm going to try to utilize Flipgrid for like finding an authentic audience. It's really simple for students to use. I think even for formative assessments as a way, rather than having students write out a reflection or their thoughts to me, they can record something that I can really quickly review through, and you can set it up through Google Classroom. So I can control it, whether other students can see each other or if it's just visible to me. But it's a resource I plan to use probably once or twice for the PBL unit. It's not PBL related, but it's a really nice way for students to collaborate with each other or to share a reflection with the teacher.
I remembered my question. It had to do with, we had a discussion Thursday night about how does a teacher do PBL all the time? This was kind of the question that came up, or how can you justify that with everything else you have to do? How do you picture doing PBL other than doing it for this course? How do you think it could work in your classroom?
I have a coworker right now she based her entire day and all subject areas around a book that they're reading called A Long Walk to Water. Sorry, I have a parrot that has. But she sat down, and regular learning didn't work for her kids, so she had to come up with something else. And she worked in how like a graphing project for math that had to do with it that they could relate to their own lives. And she pulled in social studies things, and she has them writing about things and making things. And it's just really cool how she incorporated the entire day in all subject areas into this one thing. And the kids are never just sitting and filling out a worksheet. They're always doing things or creating things. And I just thought that was really cool. So a way that you can just make it all kind of flow together and make it the whole school day. I think that's really interesting.
How might a teacher move toward being maybe considered a PBL classroom? What do you think that might look like? Would be all the time, every day? What's doable?
Unit that you start with, where again, you're not tacking on something extra, but you, for whatever reason, there's one set of standards or that you've been doing one way, and maybe it might work nicely to be sort of a student-driven project, and maybe start with one set of standards replacing something that you've done. So it's not extra, it's just a different way of doing it.
We started PBL at my school 2 years ago, and we set a kind of a 3-year plan. Last school year, every teacher was responsible for designing and implementing one full-blown PBL, one for the year. This year, we're doing 2. Our school's on a trimester, so then next year, the idea is that each trimester, they implement one full-blown PBL that addresses standards that take place in that trimester. I think some folks get a little concerned when they think, if this is all the only way that we're teaching all the time, aren't there times when I need to do direct instruction, or we just need to do skills development? What are your thoughts on that? Have you thought about the same thing?
Constantly. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I'm sorry. I think about that all the time. I talked about it at lunch today with a colleague of mine. And I know it might seem like it's music, but there are so many conversations people have about making everything student-centered. That's whether it's PBL or not. That's a conversation people have all the time. And the question was, okay, well, at what age, can that start? That's the question somebody brought up, was what age can we start that? Because surely people have to learn skills first. And that's probably not true. We can probably teach skills through PBL, but the question is how to do it. Because so many things that we talk about are, sort of abstract, assuming that students do have a baseline to work from. At least in music, we're saying, oh, we want to make ourselves better. Well, we assume they probably know something about a model of what it should sound like or anything like that. And if that's not true, then we have to come up with a different way for them to find out what that sounds like besides just telling them. And I think that's where the challenge might be for us.
I think that's where some of I forget which article it was, but it talks about like the different types of blank-based teaching to where like you could do a problem-based lesson where it's almost mirrors and looks like it falls under the umbrella of the project itself, but it's just problem-based, and therefore you're gaining your skills, your background knowledge through just a problem and maybe just an activity rather than just skill and drill type things. So I definitely think it's possible.
What other thoughts are you having? I know you are. Or questions?
One of the articles cited research was at the Iowa State standardized test that showed growth for students who were taught under PBL instruction. But I think it comes back to just the learners that are in your room. And like any good teacher, you need to be cognizant of the needs of the students and the different learning styles that are in front of you. I think there's obviously place for PBL and lots of research that supports doing that. But I think there's other types of teaching that can be incorporated too, or need to be incorporated depending on the needs of the learners that you have.
How do you think most administrators view PBL?
My administrator tells us over and over he'd rather come in the room and hear it loud and noisy and see kids up and moving. He said it really annoys him when he goes into the same classrooms all the time and he sees the same thing happening. They're just sitting in their desk listening to the teacher lecture. So I know how my principal feels about it.
Yay.
I appreciate that thought.
I think that there's this strange thing that's happening between administration and teachers, where I think a lot of teachers think or say that their administration wouldn't let them do something, and versus the administrators actually wanting it or maybe encouraging it. So I think it's just caught in flux, or it could possibly be that maybe the teachers are comfortable with teaching a prescribed set of things. I mean, you kind of look at the personality type that goes into, especially an elementary educator, very detail-oriented, regimented, wanting a calendar with I'm doing this on this day, this on this day, this on this day. So I don't know. That's just my opinion, is that I think there's more autonomy than what actually seems to be.
I think it has a lot to do with how you present it too. Like how you bring it up and tell them, and the information you give them to explain what it is before you try to implement it.
How many of you have let your administrator know that you're working on this?
Mine expects that I'm doing this because we implemented it about 3 years ago. And so he just assumes that we are all doing this.
We are a STEAM school,
Mhm.
and so it's been interesting to see, that's what the training I have, just a lot of similarities between a PBL model and a STEAM lesson model. So I think, like Judy said, our principal is expecting that our lessons are that way. We refer to it more like STEAM, and there's some differences here and there, but ultimately it's
A lot of the same elements, yeah.
it is student focused, real world, relevancy, collaboration, all of those things go into it.
I'm going to encourage you to let your principal know, and perhaps when you get to the end and you're presenting to a public audience, and invite administration in, or maybe present to another class, maybe older students or younger students. But I think the more that administrators see what you're doing and how it works, the more convinced they will become as well. But like Brandon said, I think we sometimes assume administration wouldn't like this, but they're probably wishing some teacher wouldn't start. You never know.
It's kind of interesting at the program that I teach at, because we're not a schoolhouse per se, but we all employ licensed teachers, and we're on the end of PBL to where everything that we do is problem-based or blank-based learning, but we have a problem with not being able to actually have a full-fledged project, because teachers bring their students to us for an entire week, and that's it. And they're only at our program for 4 hours a day. So we have a lot of, I wouldn't say self-serve, but prescribed project or problem-based, very small projects that the students work on, that I guess maybe teachers could, back at their schools, easily take that. And we've had teachers in the past ask, like, how can we take it to the next step, like back at our school? And yeah, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not I kind of leave my unit open-ended like that, to where, a teacher could take it and then kind of like make it into a bigger project. But I just want to develop a unit that I'm going to be able to use in our program, as opposed to something a teacher would use. So I don't know, but we are teachers, so it's weird.
So you're trying to design a PBL that will happen within a 5-day period.
Yep.
I do like the idea, though, of having one built out longer, that you would get it started to a certain point and a teacher could take over if it was designed well enough that they could take it. I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
Do you ever get those same kids back later in the year, or is it just you see them 5 days once a year?
No, we'll see them the next year, because they come to our program as 4th graders, and then if their school does come to our program again, we'll see them in 5th grade again. So,
but only once per school year.
Once per school year, yeah.
Be nice if you saw them like 3 different times or something, where you could follow up. And
it would be. It is nice though, the breadth of students that we get to see from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So we see private schools, we see Minneapolis-St. Paul public schools, we see students from all over Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that is nice.
Is there anything else that you need from me or from each other right now? Feel like you got a handle on this first step anyway? Okay. Well, we don't have to go the full hour if there isn't more, but I'll just stick in the room here in case anybody wants to stick around and just talk about something specific. So I wish you luck. Please check into the discussion forum and look at what I posted there, and then also back into the course resources. If you look in the full unit plan folder, I put in some completed plans that I think will help you. And take a look at that checklist as you move along.
Great, thanks, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Have fun. Stay warm.